My name is Sergey. I am a reporter on a Hype.Codes portal. We write about IT technologies, programming technologies, blockchain, and everything that is related with it. We are making an interview with you. I think you understood it. So can you please tell me about yourself and where do you work, what do you do, general information?
Okay, so I'm a software developer from Poland. I worked mainly with web applications for the last 14 years or so. My background is I graduated as a bachelor in computer science, so I worked with, I studied a bunch of languages, but found a job as a PHP developer years ago, and then switched to Ruby back in 2007. And yeah, that was my life for almost 11 years, mostly doing Ruby. I worked a little bit with some functional languages for a few months last year, but now I'm back with Ruby as my primary language. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, so is it your first time in Russia? How do you like it? How do you like RailsClub?
Yeah, it's my first time in Russia. So obviously first time in Moscow. I really like it. It's a really nice city. I like that it's big. There's a lot of space. I live in Krakow, so it's kind of crowded, narrow streets, lots of buildings, and close to each other, and I like just the space that's here. And we've got nice weather, and it's raining in Krakow. So yeah. I really like it. People are nice, and the conference is awesome. I'm really enjoying it. Good talks, great people. I like that a lot of people have a lot of questions, so I've been talking constantly for the last 3 hours to 20 plus people. So that's good. That's really encouraging for me.
It's nice to hear. Can you give us a short keynotes about your report? What it was about, just on the camera.
So I talked about a project that I've been working on since roughly 2011, I suppose. So I'm basically trying to build a new set of tools to work with databases in Ruby, just to kind of shift people to an alternative approach, which is not a typical object-oriented approach when it comes to working with databases. So the talk was about the upcoming version 4.0, which is expected to be released next month in October. And the main thing was to show you that this library, despite the fact that it's much more advanced than existing solutions, it's finally as easy to use as these existing solutions. So that was mostly it.
As far as I understand, your library is created to replace Active Record, yes? In general,
yeah, an alternative.
It can be used as alternative of Active Record. So I have a few questions about it. What is the main advantage of your product?
So the main advantage is that it's much more flexible than Active Record because you don't have to model your application domain in the same way as you model your database tables. So you can diverge from the canonical schema, as I call it. You can have different sets of attributes in certain models, and certain models don't have to be a one-to-one mapping between the tables and the representation in Ruby. This means that when your application is growing and you start to see more and more domain-specific concepts, you will be able to model them with ROM and adjust their data by using a query API that we have. It's also easier to make changes in the database because you have this change set API that we introduced recently. So you can use it to transform data from some representation that your application receives into a structure that is compatible with your database. And this is something that we don't have in Active Record. This concept of data transformation doesn't exist there. So that's one thing. And it's kind of lightweight compared to Active Record. because the data structures that we load, the objects that we load that represent data, they are just smaller than active record objects. They take less memory, and they are faster to instantiate. So as a result, ROM is faster. And also, it can work with different databases. So people are using ROM with, for example, data that they pull in from YAML files or CSV files or some HTTP APIs. And then they kind of combine these data with what they have in their database, maybe store it in the database after some transformation. So it's just much more flexible and support more backends. Yeah. So these were advantages. Disadvantages are mostly related to the fact that it's still a relatively young project. I mentioned that I've been working on this since 2011, but the first few years were mostly experimentation and just trying to figure it out. But the project, like practically speaking, started in 2014. In November, I released first kind of usable version, so it's just 3 years ago. So that's not a lot for an open source project. 3 years, it's like 3 months in case of a normal project that people are being paid to work on a daily basis. So with an ad hoc open source work, 3 years, it's not a lot of time. So yeah, as a result, like we are lacking documentation, which is a big priority right now for the current release. And our community is much smaller, so there are less third-party tools, third-party extensions than in case of Active Record. Like we don't have third-party solutions for stuff like file uploads or authorization, all the common things that people need. Active Record has some kind of extensions. We don't have them, so you're pretty much on your own in many common cases. So that's the biggest disadvantage. So if you don't feel like building, I don't know, a plugin for handling file uploads, then it's not going to be a good fit for you. So that's the biggest disadvantage.
How do you see the world of programming in 10 and in 50 years? And will Ruby and Rails have place in this future in the world of programming?
I have no idea, really. Like that's an honest question. I don't know. I can't see the future. I think Ruby is doing well. I'm especially excited about alternative Ruby implementations, especially Truffle Ruby, which is getting more and more attention. I'm also looking forward to Ruby 3, obviously. I think it's going to be easier to predict the future once Ruby 3 is released. But I think that we have a strong community, and language is not everything. I think that ecosystem built around the language and the community is equally important. And I think that we have a very strong community, which is evolving very fast these days. We see more and more new projects in our community, and it's doing well. So I know that there are other languages like Elixir, which is getting a lot of attention these days as well. But it's a young language with a very young ecosystem. So it's going to take a while for more, for younger languages to reach a point where we are already, in terms of our experience and our knowledge and how we work together as a community. So yeah, I think Ruby is doing fine, and it's going to be quite good for the next few years at least.
We started to talk about popular Hype technologies. How do you think what is the hypest?
The hypest, okay.
Yes, technology in programming right now.
I don't know. I'm to be honest, I'm not really following hype. It's too distracting because I would like to check out everything. But I don't know. I think Elixir is a big hype, although not in a bad way, in a good way. Nothing else comes to my mind. Sorry.
Okay, it's great answer. Okay, so in the last few years, IT and programming and all related careers became very popular among people who look for job, and there are millions of programmers, server administrators, and related guys in IT world. So, what advice can you give for average coder? How he or she can stand out of the crowd and make something great?
Write and read a lot of code. Yeah, really, that has been my advice for many years. I think that, I know it's going to sound controversial, but I think that people spend too much time discussing code and reading books instead of just sitting together and writing code and reading code. You can learn a lot from just this, and maybe discussing it afterwards. But the more code you write and the more code you read, the better you become, and it's happening faster. Like for me, the fact that I started contributing to open source, it helped me learn so much in just like a couple of years. I'm pretty sure that I would spend like 10 times more if I was just relying on my job. So yeah, I guess contributing to open source is also a great way to learn, and not just to learn how to write code, but also how to work with people, because with open source you work with people around the world. So you learn how to communicate, you meet a lot of different people, you sort of work in teams, sometimes small teams, sometimes bigger teams, so that also helps you a lot. So yeah, these two things I think are very important.
Okay, thank you. So, what makes you excited about your job? Like, for example,
I really enjoy using things that I've written. It's because it motivates me to continue working on them and improving them, and it's just such a joy for me to build something and then use it in a project as a tool that's used like internally. I also really like just working with people. So I hate to be like a lone wolf, just writing stuff that nobody else can see. So I love working in a team where we are just helping each other and learn a lot from each other as well. And yeah, and whenever I write something that other people can use, it's also, it gives me a lot of, joy and fun. Yeah, it's really rewarding.
so maybe you plan to write a book, or you are writing it right now, or you have some plans, or maybe you have already wrote a book and I just don't know about it. Tell me about it.
I haven't. I plan to write a book. So yeah, I'm planning to write a book about RailsRB, the project that I talked about today. So this will be not too detailed, basically a book which explains RailsRB in a very basic way, like a short introduction, without going too much into details, just because it's a big project, and I don't want to write a. First of all, I don't have time to write a big book, but secondly, because I want people to be able to quickly learn the basics and truly understand how it works, not just how to use it, but how it works. Because the cool part is that it's possible to explain how ROM works, and it's good to understand how the tools that you use work. So that's something I want to achieve with this book. Short introduction and explain how it works, so that people can see that, oh, well, I actually get it.
Do you have any nightmares related to coding or programming?
Oh, I don't recall any nightmares related to my work.
You're a happy man.
Yeah, I guess. No, sorry, I don't have nightmares about my work.
Oh, nice to hear it. Thank you. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, likewise.
I really like it.